Hey y'all, it's Sunday. Time for the Sunday sermon. I'm sure my Jewish grandparents are rolling over in their graves that I do something called a sermon. So you can see I'm sitting on the stairs. I'm in Vermont. It's always an adventure on Sundays if I'm out of town to figure out where I'm going to film this. So today I want to talk to you about the idea of love and obligation. So I was coaching a client this week and she was talking about how her family is going on a trip and she wants her boyfriend to come. And he doesn't really want to go. It's like, he's busy at work and he doesn't really like the place they're going and he's not super sociable and he just doesn't want to go. So so while I was talking to her about it and coaching her, she said, well, I just think that if he loved me enough, he would go, right? Love is doing things for your partner that you don't want to do. I thought that was so interesting, right? And I think that a lot of us have that thought. A lot of us believe that someone demonstrates their love for us by doing things they don't want to do that we want them to do, right? We've turned that into a measure of how much someone loves us, which is super interesting because it's sort of this, almost like this idea of martyrdom or suffering, like someone's willingness to suffer for us is proof of how much they love us. And I think that that's an unconscious assumption a lot of us have, but it's really worth examining. It's such an interesting concept in the first place. It almost seems kind of religious or Christian in origin, right? That's sort of like somebody suffers to show their love for us. Not that obviously people of all religions have this thought about their intimate relationships, but I think we have it for a couple of reasons. So I think that the main reason that we think this is when we were taught that to some extent, right? That shows up in like guilt comments from parents, right? That shows up in maybe religious mythology that someone's suffering is proof of love. But also often what's going on is that we just want someone to do what we want, right? And so we attach all this meaning to it and we want to use our love to almost like guilt or motivate them. So in this situation, my client wants her boyfriend to go on the trip so that she can think he loves me enough to come on the trip even though he doesn't want to. That's actually all she's really subconsciously after. She wants to believe he loves her, so she thinks the way for him to prove it is by doing something he doesn't want to do. But the only reason she wants him to do it is so she can have the thought and so she can feel loved. And when I made her make a list, there were 100 other ways that her partner, her boyfriend, shows her love that have nothing to do with being forced to do things he doesn't want to do, right? He might bring her flowers. He might buy her favorite chocolate at the store. He tucks her in at night because he goes to sleep before she does. He, puts his hand on her neck whenever he passes her. Like he does a whole bunch of things to show affection and love. But she has fixated on this thing he doesn't want to do and made it the defining sort of point of whether or not he really loves her. And it all comes from this thought that love is doing things for people we don't want to do. And I think a lot of us hear that from our family, that, being in a family and loving your family means doing things you don't want to do. But I think it's worth examining because what it does is it just creates this very conditional love where you only love someone if they do what you want them to, even when they don't want to. And that's not really pleasant for anyone, right? They don't want to do the thing. So it's not pleasant for them. And if they're doing it out of an obligation, they're not really doing it. It's not actually because they love you so much they're willing to suffer. Exactly, right? Like when we do something out of obligation, it's because we have a thought that makes us feel guilty if we don't, right? So if you get your partner to do something for you that they don't want to do, or your family, your parent, your kid, your friend, it's actually not romantic limited. You get someone to do something that they don't want to do, they're not filled with a feeling of love for you, right? They're feeling guilt and obligation, and they're doing it to avoid those thoughts in their own head. And then you want them to do it so you can have the thought, oh, they love me. And then you can feel good, and they feel guilty and obligated. Why is that the best outcome, right? What if you let them be them? You think about all the ways they already show you they love you that they like doing, right? That they do voluntarily because they love you. You get to feel loved, they get to be themselves, and nobody has to be miserable, right? So I really encourage you to look at your relationships in your life. Again, it's not just romantic. People have this with their friends. People really have it with their families. The idea that love is obligation and love means doing things you don't want to do. It all rests on the premise that we control other people's feelings, right? And so we need to do things we don't want to do so that they can feel loved. But we don't create their feelings, right? And when we're on the flip side of this, we feel like we have to do the things the other person can feel loved. That doesn't work either, right? Because as soon as you agree, then all of a sudden the other person's like, well, you're only doing it because I'm making you. And you're like, yeah, that's right. that's what you just said you wanted me to do to prove I loved you, right? It's a lose-lose game. It doesn't produce the feelings you want it to on either side of the equation. So what if you were responsible for your feelings, your partner was allowed to show love in any way, or your family or whoever was allowed to show love in any way they wanted to, everybody took responsibility for their own feelings, everybody would get to feel more love and feel more loved too. All right, y'all. That's it for this Sunday, so give that a try. Rewatch this if this was confusing for you. It's a kind of deep concept I did quickly, and I'll talk to you on the podcast on Thursday. Bye.